Welcome to Investories, a podcast about real stories, real estate, and taking real action. Join hosts John Hooper and Kyle Robertson as they talk investing, mindset, and taking that first step. We all have a story. What's yours? The Investories Podcast.
Booyah! Welcome to the Investories Podcast with me, your host, John Hooper, and
Kyle Robertson.
Kyle.
Co-host.
I like it.
Yeah.
Happy 4th of July.
Is it? That was 2 days ago.
Well, yeah, but time doesn't mean anything. Did you have a good 4th of July?
I think it means something. I had a great 4th of July. Yeah, we bought a bunch of illegal fireworks, which was great because you can't shoot anything off the ground in Oregon. So the majority of the population will head north to Washington, to all you criminals up there in that state that have the cool fireworks. And,
so you for the 4th of July, you smuggled things.
We smuggled things across the border. Yeah, I'm throwing a crime right out there into the airways.
Land of the free.
Land of the free. Well, it's funny because in our little town, I mean, we live outside of town, and it just sounded like D-Day. I mean, it was insane because the majority of Oregon goes to Washington. I'm sure they've got a hell of a fireworks economy up there, just thanks to the Oregon population. But yeah, they go up there and buy all these mortars, Roman candles, the bottle rockets, all the stuff that everybody around the country uses. You can't have that in Oregon. It's not allowed to leave the ground because it starts. They're afraid we're going to start fires and red flag warnings and things like that. And it's true, they do. I mean, I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I'm just saying it's, this is our childhood. We used to do that kind of stuff. It's fun. And so we grabbed some of that stuff. My kids got to see the stuff in the air for the first time ever. And it was a lot of fun. How about you?
That's cool. Yeah. As a Brit, I just relaxed and kept my head down. Celebrated Give Back America Day.
Give Back America. Oh, I love it.
You're welcome.
Red coats. Yeah.
Yeah.
Appreciate it, John.
I wore a red jacket.
Yeah. Isn't that treason?
Yeah, we had some people
treason
over,
day.
Hung out. It was all fun and games. My little one ran into the side of the fridge, I think, which was kind of funny.
Oh.
Yeah, she was pretty upset about that.
But it's pretty funny. Yeah.
No, and then we hung out. We have a deck, so we sat on the deck and saw a few fireworks. So it's kind of chilled, kind of relaxing. I did go for a run first thing in the morning. And my God, it looked like Camp Bastion down around the beach of San Diego.
Bastion?
Oh, it's the big camp in Afghanistan where they have all these tents set up.
Gotcha.
Unbelievable. So many people stayed overnight, which is also illegal in San Diego.
Criminals down there too.
Yeah,
huh?
I mean, I phoned the police, but they weren't interested. No, so people would set up volleyball courts, everything.
It sounds like fun.
Real estate 101. Just grab a piece of land and start building, right?
Yeah, so, it's like homesteading all over again. That's great.
So that was cool. Yeah. So anyway, back to Investories. And hey, quick prompt to everyone. If you could give us a 5-star review on iTunes, we would absolutely love that. Celebrate the 4th by giving us a 5-star review. I don't know. Does that fit?
It's a good
and
plug,
also,
I guess.
check us out on YouTube. We are growing on YouTube. It takes me ages to do the video, so it's worth just saying, well done, subscribing. We have a few subscribers now, which is kind of cool. And liking. And I think you can hit a bell notification and it will tell you when a new episode is posted. So you get a little bit more feedback, same great content from us. But if you could do that, it really is a ton of uploading. Just think of the bandwidth that we're using just to upload videos. So that would be super, super helpful. And so I guess without further ado, the episode today is with Scott Jelinek. Scott is kind of an interesting story. He's been investing for, I think, 30 years. He's kind of rode out the recession, and it's kind of changed his whole viewpoint in how he invests and what he invests in. It's kind of a fascinating conversation to kind of dig into that and that contrarian mindset, right, Kyle? I think that's not controversial.
Yeah, and it's kind of, I told him after we got done recording that it was a refreshing conversation because his mindset on a lot of this stuff, when we talked a lot of things about debt, about leverage and the problems that can come along with it. And he has pivoted his portfolio to a debt-free structure, except for private money financing that he uses for the purchase. But they're such short-term, high-interest loans that they're paid off in a short amount of time. And I'll let him explain exactly what his structure is. But this is a great episode for people who are considering the risks of bank loans, of over leveraging, of getting yourself in a position where when the economy does tank, because it will, and it always does, what do you do? And kind of pay attention to the way that he learned his lessons and really take something from that, because I'm kind of in the same position where it's like I'm trying my very best not to just be so focused on growth that I over leverage myself and set myself up for failure. And Scott goes through that and explains it in such a fantastic way that it's really easy to understand. So pay attention to that.
Yeah, it's familiar from '08, right? Over leveraging, taking out too much loans. We've even if you're not an investor and it's just your house, that's something we've considered. Should we get a HELOC? Maybe not, actually. Maybe now isn't the time to take out further financing on our home to invest. I really dig the mindset piece of that and kind of how he got to that viewpoint. But anyway, enough of my waffling, and without further ado, here's Scott. Welcome to the Investories podcast, Scott Jelinek. Hey, Scott.
How are you today?
Good. I should be asking, how are you? Thanks for joining us.
Fantastic. Glad to be here.
So Scott has, hundreds of properties. He's been investing for 30 years. And I'm really interested on the kind of latest endeavor. I don't know if we can still say latest. It's been a while, but the slow flip process. There's another bit in your bio that was super interesting, which is, and I guess we're all kind of looking back, is the kind of leading out from the last recession and kind of lessons learned. So we really want to get into that as well, Scott. So thank you for joining us.
John, I got to tell you something funny, and this just happened the other day. I don't know how long you've been investing, but I talk about the crash like it was yesterday all the time. And, it's deep in my heart, right? Well, someone just the other day said to me, Scott, that was 15 years ago, right? And I had to do them. I'm like, wow, you're right. That is 15 years. I feel like it was yesterday. And it's amazing how ingrained it is in me that I have lessons learned that doesn't matter what's going on in the market, they will not change.
So, Scott, let's talk about that. Like, what was your route into investing? What did that look like?
So I got started, I was a landscaper, and back then, this is early. I bought my first house in 1994. Back then, they had a thing called non-qualifying assumptions. And I don't know if you know about them or remember them. They did away with them in 87 for FHA and 89 for VA. But what it meant was anybody, no credit, no job, no anything, could assume your mortgage if you worked out a deal with the seller. Much like a sub 2 is now, but with the bank's blessing. The bank, you literally had a closing and the bank put the mortgage in your name. And so I bought that house, and I had no interest in real estate. I bought it to live in. And shortly after, another house on the block came up for sale for less than half the amount down. And I didn't know values. I didn't know anything other than I paid $5,000 down. This one said $2,000 down, and I felt like I got ripped off. And so then I decided, let me buy that one also, right? And that was my first start in real estate, where every month my tenant would pay me and I would pay the mortgage, and it was constantly negative me. I'm like, I borrowed the money, they're paying it off. I borrowed it, they're paying it off. And I became obsessed with, I want to buy as many as I can and just wait out time. That was my whole plan. Just wait out. Back then, you were taking over a 30-year mortgage. You might have been 6-7 years in. And it was just, let me just wait out time. And eventually, I'll be rich. And that was the plan, and then, things evolved and grew and grew and grew. And then we had some changes in the market and came up with a new plan.
The fundamentals are sound, right? Buy a property, get someone else to pay it off, and then buy another one.
Yep, absolutely.
I like it.
Absolutely.
So you're ex-Army, right, Scott?
Yep, I was in the Army way back in the first Gulf War.
So was there like a transition from Army to landscaping to investor entrepreneur? How does that work?
So I had no viable skills that I can use outside of the Army when I got out. I still lived on Long Island at the time. I used to walk the beach and sell sodas. And I loved it. I would make about $200 a day, and I just walked around, ice cold soda, Pepsi, Diet Pepsi, and I sold sodas on the beach, and I loved it. And then my mother had moved to Virginia Beach, and my plan was to do the same thing. I'm thinking, well, go into a place with beach in its name, right? I'll sell sodas here. I don't know if you've ever been to Virginia Beach, but our beach is tiny here. I mean, it's long, but it's thin, and there's hotels and restaurants, very unlike Jones Beach in New York. And so there was no business here doing that. And so I was like, well, what am I going to do to make any money? And, I still tell people literally 30 years later, if anybody who complains they can't find work, I'm like, listen, anybody can grab a lawnmower and go knock on doors where you see high grass and make a living. Anybody could. And that's exactly how I got started. I started mowing lawns.
It's interesting because we have a lot of investors on here. We have a lot of real estate and brokers on here and people from all walks of life. And I think what kind of narrows down not everybody, but a lot of the people that we have on here typically go back to some sort of a sales background. Yeah. Now, this is an interesting question that I like asking people. I don't know if I've asked it so much on this podcast, but do you consider yourself a salesman, and is that important? Do you consider that an important aspect in your real estate investing career?
So in the slow flips that we do, I guess it still applies in the slow flips, not as much though, but I also wholesale. And so in wholesaling, I go on appointments. We call them buy call appointments. I go on appointments and sit in someone's living room and go over the process to do a contract, in which case it is 1,000% sales. And when I teach, I also teach literally step by step the sales process. Even though in that case we're a buyer, it's still sales. And so, 1,000%. I think sales, and you mentioned that you see everybody is in sales who you see doing this. I think everybody's in sales, whether they're doing this or anything else. It's just the difference of whether you accept it and whether or not you're good at it and study it and learn it. But you're in sales, whether you like it or not. Everybody's selling. Even if you're young and single and you're trying to get a girlfriend or a wife, you're in sales, right?
It's really funny that. Sorry, I don't mean to keep interrupting you. I just love talking about this, but it's really interesting where most people don't realize that that's what they are. You're trying to sell yourself. You're trying to sell your deal. If you're a buyer, you're trying to sell your LOI, trying to sell your. When you started talking about selling sodas back there on the beach, did you say Long Island? Is that where you're at?
Jones Beach, yeah.
Yeah, Jones Beach. How in the world did you even come up with a business idea like that? Because it's interesting because I'm constantly hearing from people, just random people. I'm looking for a side hustle. I'm looking at how do I make some extra money? How do I do this? How do I do that? I mean, you sell sodas on a boardwalk at a beach. I mean, that's just insane. Where did you come up with that? How that came
about is I was at the beach and it's different than a lot of beaches. There's no infrastructure there, right? So you have to walk forever from your car. If you didn't bring it with you, you don't have it, right? And so a guy was walking around selling them and I bought them and it was $2 a can. And this was in the early 90s. And back then in the store, it was 25 cents a can. And I remember I'm like, man, they're making $2 a can, 25 cents. And so I started looking into, well, is it even legal? Are you allowed to do this? I said, there's no regulation. You're not allowed to do it, but nobody's enforcing anything. And I'm like, well, this is great. All I do is, buy a cooler, buy ice and spend my day at the beach. And I loved it. I'd make about $200 a day. And I thought it was great.
I'm going to get down the beach after that. I love that. And I am actually in sales. And what I'd say is you're not selling the soda. You're selling the feeling of an ice cold soda in your hand, drinking it, and that kind of outcome. But that's what we're doing in real estate, right? You're selling a property, you're selling an investment fund, and you're selling the outcome of that, whether it's from an investor or a tenant that's going to move in. You're selling that they're part of that dream.
Right. And my business that we've evolved to, which we call slow flips, the whole pitch with slow flips, why people get into it is it's freedom. I no longer talk about people about making $1 bazillion and buying Lamborghinis and any of that. I'm all about setting yourself free, having a number to set yourself free. And that's literally what I sell to my people is forget all of that. Not to say you can't still want that or still do it after, but right now your number one goal is to set yourself free. Then you can figure out what you want to be next. But so freedom is number one.
I really want to ask about slow flips, but first I want to kind of do the 15-year time travel back if I had a DeLorean or a Lamborghini, and pop back and really understand kind of a lot of people don't remember that period. Kyle, I don't think you remember that period as an investor, right?
What's that? The
2008 crash.
I had two investment properties, and I was a real estate broker and lost my job because of it. So I still have fond nightmares of that time of my life.
Nightmares. I love that. But if you can, Scott, what did that look like going into that and coming out the other end? What did that look like? And I think particularly around the kind of the mental fortitude to kind of process and keep going. I know Kyle's talked to that a little bit.
I'm going to explain it to you, but I don't know if it was fortitude other than lack of options. So I'm going to take you back to 2001. Up until 2001, I acquired about 20 properties, all Virginia Beach, non-qualifying assumptions, and they were great properties, and they were all rented. In 2001 was the first time since I started in 94 that we had any appreciation. So suddenly these houses I was buying, I was paying 65 for, now worth 80 and 90. And so I started becoming real interested in other ends of real estate. And I went to all the seminars and I read the books and I got all involved with these real estate groups. And everybody was teaching basically that I was an idiot with my first 20 houses, that you need to pull out that equity. You have, all this money in equity on each one, pull it out and you can buy more. And so I did. And I met with these mortgage people and I refinanced all my houses and I pulled out 50, 80 grand on each of them and bought more houses. Kept doing that. And I started wholesaling and other stuff in the interim until 2007. I had 84 properties in 2007. And and I know everybody always says 2008, and I'm like, I assure you it was 2007. I have my QuickBooks to prove it. But in 2007, instantly, it was like overnight, probably 30, 40% of my people stopped paying. And it wasn't their fault. Like everybody thinks just real estate was hurt. It doesn't matter what industry you're within. Everybody got hurt. Even good people that were great payers. People didn't have jobs anymore. People stopped paying. I had 84 houses. I also had 84 mortgages. So I was making all this money prior. And now I'm losing it, $20,000, $25,000 a month I'm losing. And I continued to lose until I had almost just under $1 million in cash saved at the time. And I felt like, well, let me weather the storm. This has to end. It can't keep going, right? It has to end. And I in hindsight, I wish I had stopped in the beginning, but I did. I fought the good fight. And once I ran out of money, I what came next. I lost about 55 of them to foreclosure. And I always say that was tough on anybody to lose a house, right? But it was especially tough on me. I had an escalator on the side said stop foreclosure in my phone number. We were all about stop foreclosure. We buy houses, and so it was tough. Most people that were in business back then, in my business, went back to their previous lives. They went back to their job at IBM, went back to whatever they were doing. They had a great 5 years, in the boom, and then went back to their previous lives. I didn't have a previous life. I was mowing lawns, and now I had this big lifestyle. And I'm like, well, if I'm looking for a job, and I thought about it, what can I do? I said, I have to get a job like as a brain surgeon or something. I said, I'm a high school dropout. I said, nobody's hiring me as a brain surgeon. And so I kept like, I have to figure this out because I have this big lifestyle now. I have these cars and the house and my wife and kid. And I'm like, well, we have to figure it out. One of the things that I did, which in hindsight was like the smartest thing I've ever done, is I started looking at the people who were doing well. A lot of people got crushed. Most people got crushed. Most everybody got crushed and went back to their previous lives. But some people were still killing it more than ever. And a lot of them were the older guys. They were my lenders, my hard money lenders, and the guys that I knew all along. And during the boom, I'm thinking, man, these guys are stupid. They can make so much more right? Well, after the bust, they were like waiting for it. And they were killing it. And so in conversations, one of the things I realized across the board with all of them, and I know this is controversial to everybody hates this, but they owned everything free and clear, everything. Everything they had, I'm driving in a Cadillac XLR convertible, $105,000 I spent on it. I have 2 Escalades. They're pulling up in a Honda Accord. They're the ones loaning me the money, right? They're pulling up in a Honda Accord. They have their houses. They might have only had 20, 30 houses, but they own them all free and clear. Good times, bad times, it don't matter. Every month they got another 30 grand on the first or whatever the number was. And if nobody paid, if there was a hard time, well, it didn't cost them anything. They just had lost revenue. They're not at risk of losing anything. And it really resonated with me because it wasn't one or two. It was everybody who was still doing well was living by that exact same principle. And now we haven't had, ever since anybody who started now, and that's funny because when I say this, people love to argue with me. So I don't argue. I always just say, you're right. Anybody who started from 2009 on, 2008 even on, they've never seen anything different. It's been straight up, right? And mind you, it may stay that way another 50 years. And they'll be like, man, that Scott guy was stupid because we made $1 bazillion and he could have made so much more, right? So anybody who started from then on doesn't see any different side of it, which is why people say, Scott, it's been 15 years, get over it. And but I'm not starting over again. I'm too old now, right? So I've restructured everything to where I completely am free and clear now. My house, my cars, I'm all about free and clear. But with my properties, you can't buy free and clear unless you have $20 million to start, right? So we do a hybrid where I do finance them with private money, but I do them on short-term mortgages, usually 5 years, and that's it. And so, yeah, it was
so, and I there's so much gold in what you were talking about just now, and so many different points that I really hope that people were paying attention to, because I can't tell you how many times we've talked about on this show. Leverage, and not just us, man. It's the
everybody.
Pockets community. It's It's anybody who's under the age of 40, who's, like you said, been in this game for, less than 15 years. They think that, this is the way to grow because that's what the quote gurus are telling everybody to do. And I think, this what's going on right now, I don't know if we've seen the end of it. Nobody does. There's lots of speculation if this is the end of the recession or if we're gonna have a soft landing, blah, blah, blah. We don't know. Nobody knows. But the stagnation of real estate is a real thing. It really can stagnate, but nobody wants to believe that because it hasn't happened in their investing careers. And then when I look to the guys, like you were talking about, the older guys, the guys that have been around for a little while, and I see 50% leverage or less or 0% leverage, and these guys are sitting back drinking their Mai Tais, retiring out to Palm Springs. It's like, look, number one, they put their time in, they earned their stripes, probably took some licks like yourself, and they learned from it. And here you are with your portfolio paid off. You're not exposed to the banks. You really can become slaves to leverage. And when bad times happen, those are the people that get crushed. And so that is such a huge point. I wish that people could start looking out of both eyes, as if that's the right term to say, and think, okay, yes, yeah, it is now. Thanks, John. Yeah. And use leverage appropriately and responsibly, but then know when to say when. And I was talking on this podcast not that long ago, gosh, if I had my properties paid off, the amount of cash flow I would have would just be stupid. Just a stupid amount of cash flow. It is. But they're not paid off, and I don't have a stupid amount of cash flow, which is sad. But now my wife and I have been having a lot of conversations. Is it time to pivot? And so did it take 2008 for you to realize it was time for me to pivot, or 2007, and as you said, that it's time for me to pivot and quit doing this and go to these short-term loans? And how hard was that to change your mindset?
It wasn't hard. It was not hard to change the mindset because I was floundering, right? I was floundering, and I'm looking at who's doing well. And I teach this as well. I always teach people. I said, listen, you don't have to invent anything. Look at somebody who's doing what you want and do that, right? It's not rocket science. Right. And so I realized, okay, the guys who were safe and secure and doing great, good market, bad market, this is what they did. So I didn't need to be convinced any further of that. What I did have a problem with, though, is I lost a ton of houses to foreclosure. So how do you think my credit was, right? Crap. I had no income all of 2007, almost all of 2008. I had zero income. So I have no taxes to show. So I can't qualify for anything. To this day, we're doing this now in 2023. I have not used a bank for anything since 2007, anything. So what happened is now prices started coming down, and their deals I'm like salivating over. I would love to buy this, but simultaneously I'm dead to the banks. So which is what kind of started the percolating with, well, how can I do this? How can I buy them and use private money, obviously, but I don't want to be in debt, but I still don't have any money now. So I have to borrow and get them paid off. And so I did all kinds of calculations till I came up with the number. And the number, and I know if you're in California, and both of you guys in California and in Oregon, when you hear these numbers, you're going to be like, you're insane. These numbers don't exist. But I always tell people, I said, just use the internet. They exist. We were buying houses at $30,000 and financing them for 5 years at 12% interest we're paying. We still pay 12% interest, but that makes your payment $667.33, and that's amortized. There's no balloon. And then I'm simultaneously selling them for back then it was for $89,000. Now the same house we're getting $199, but for $89,000 for 30 years and collecting $875 a month. And so it was all just cash flow. We weren't making anything for 5 years. After taxes and insurance, we're not making anything. But then after 5 years, it's all ours. And so it was a struggle. You have to suffer through those first 5 years. But I'm like, I'd rather suffer for 5 years than be on a house of cards for the rest of my life. And, so it was a risk and a struggle the first 5 years. You're like, is this worth it? Am I doing the right thing? Because you're not making any money. You're buying all these houses. But as soon as we hit the 61st month, all of a sudden you're like, it was right. The way I had it in my head was right. And
I'm curious. I'm curious. This is really interesting. The 5 year, you're fully amortized for a 5 year term. So are you actually? I understand that these purchase price, these price points are far lower than what we're typically, doing on the coastal states. But do you have to have a significant amount of reserves in order to weather those storms? One payment missed on a 30 year amortization for a $90,000 for a 5 year amortization on a $90,000 house. I mean, are you dipping into quite a bit of reserves? Is this? I could imagine this would be a lot of brain damage thinking about, holy crap, I'm going to lose my butt on this, right?
Zero, and I'll explain to you why. So first off, we won't buy a 90,000. The math has to work. The highest we typically go will be 50. Now I have houses there's two sides to this. I have houses all the way up to 875 that we still do this with, but we do the buy side and the sell side, right? But the slow flip is both sides, the paying them off and selling them on 30 years. So the reason I say zero reserves is because when we sell them, we get $3,000 to $5,000 down. Again, today's numbers are higher, but I always try and use the lower numbers because those, we don't know what happens tomorrow, right? So $3,000 to $5,000 down, and then there's a tiny bit of cash flow per month. Maybe it's 100, 150. But the way I teach my people is I say, you put that money in the bank and you don't get it until the house is paid off. Meaning that $3,000, that $5,000 sits there. The extra $100, $200 a month sits there until it's paid off, which is the opposite of what everyone teaches. I know everybody loves to teach to live on the spread. I teach the opposite. I tell people, and people hate to hear this, I say you do not deserve to make $1 off your house until it's free and clear. Because until then, it's not your house. It's the bank's house. And you have a job working for the bank, right? Your job is to do all the work and then send the money up to them. So until you've fulfilled your job, which is paying it off, that money's not yours. And and I know technically it is yours, but that's the way I teach them. And this way, it takes away from what you just said, Kyle, that pressure and struggle. What happens if a tenant doesn't pay? What happens if there's an eviction? Well, now I got 5 or 6 or 7 payments there. So if it takes me 6 weeks to get them out or 2 months to get them out, and I'm vacant another month, there's no pressure on me that I have to come up with this money in between. And then you collect another 3 or 5 grand down, and now you're off to races again, moving forward.
So is that privately financed, that 5-year term?
All private lenders, correct. It has to be private lenders because banks, the reason this opportunity exists, banks, there's a hole in the marketplace, right? These lower end housing, the sellers need cash to sell. They need the money to move on to their next place. But the buyers who are buying these need financing to buy. They don't have the cash. And so we step in the middle. We give them their cash, even doesn't mean it's our cash. We give them their cash and we give them their financing. So we just step in the middle and fulfill that need, which is there. The buyers need the financing, the sellers need the cash.
So I think this is probably the tactics of the slow flip, the kind of the flow of it, I guess.
Yep.
I'm trying to understand. Is it kind of like a lease to own model, or is it the 5-year runs and then it's a sale for the 30-year fixed term?
We sell it from day one. We do it through a land. Some states call it a land contract, a contract for deed, agreement for deed. We do not do a lease option or a rent to own. And I did in the beginning, and then I learned some valuable lessons that most of what everyone teaches is not correct. I learned that in court. Everyone teaches, put in the contract, they're responsible for everything. Well, it is in the contract, but the judge says, no, it's a lease, and the law says you're responsible. And so I met with an attorney, and I said, well, this is what the judge just told me. What do we got to do? And he went over and revised my contracts and made it so we're in compliance with all the laws, but not landlords. We are, the judge's words were, the benefits and burdens must convey together. With the lease option, I'm keeping the benefit and giving them the burden, right? And so we made it so the benefits and burdens convey together. They have all the benefits of ownerships and all the burdens of ownership. And so they are fine. We don't give them balloons. Our people get a really good deal too, mind you. They don't have balloons. They never have to refi. They have the same payment, and then they eventually are paying it off. So it's a win all the way around. Our lenders win, we win, our buyers win, and everybody wins in the process.
So perhaps you can talk us through a typical deal and the process breakdown. I think before that, I want to ask a question. I'm going to sneak 2 questions in, Kyle.
Go ahead.
Around how do you find these financing partners? What was
private lenders?
Yeah, private lenders. Yeah.
So I have a whole strategy, and I love to teach private money because we do so well with raising money that everybody starts off. I always say you start with friends and family, right? And the first thing out of everyone's mouth is, well, that's easy for you. I don't know anybody that has any money. Nobody in my family has any money. None of my friends have any money. And I agree, right? And if they did, they're certainly not letting you know about it, right? But so that's people who are saying that. However, the reality is the money is out there. There is plenty of money that's earning, I used to say 1%, but now they're getting up there 4% in banks, right? That they would be happy to be earning 12% secured by real estate if you had a plan and program and knew what you were doing. And so that is what we teach them, to start off by starting with friends and family. But the way we do it, what stops most people, and if I ramble on too much, John, just let me know, because I will talk. I love real estate. I can talk about real estate forever. But the way we do it, what stops most people is their fear of rejection. They're like, well, I'm not going to ask them because I know they're going to say no anyway. And then why bother? They're going to tell me no. So the way we get around that is first of all, we never ask. We offer an opportunity, right? We never ask someone to loan. We offer an opportunity to make 12% on your money secured by real estate. But to take it a step further so you can't be rejected is we never offer it to them. So if I'm talking to you right now, John, I will offer it to you, but not to you. I will tell you about it, but I will ask you if you know anybody who might be interested in making a 12% return on their money secured by real estate. Really, I am talking to you. However, you can't tell me no, because I'm not asking you to loan me anything. And we always want to maintain our program. And the way we do that is I will keep asking you if you know anybody. And then when you say, John, you'll be like, well, I might be interested in that. Tell me about it. I said, not you. You're doing all this crypto stuff, or you're doing your wherever. And, you're doing Airbnbs, not you, but you may know somebody, until you're saying, no, I might be interested. Tell me about it. And we do that so we maintain the position in control. So it's our program, not asking, can you please loan me money? We don't want to ever be in that position. So we maintain the conversation by offering an opportunity, and not to them, but do they know somebody who might be interested in that opportunity?
Interesting stuff. I am not the I'm not the guy I'm that guy you described who doesn't like the rejection. So I've never actually asked anybody for money before. I've gotten to the point
wants
where
to be rejected, right?
Nobody likes to hear the no word, right? I mean, and I'm one of those, and I've bankrolled everything that I've got up to this point, and I think every investor gets to that at some point. This point where I'm at, where it's like, I've deployed the majority of what I feel comfortable deploying. What's next step for me? And for me, I think it's probably going to be, head in that direction, whether it's partnerships, raising private capital, or something along those lines. So when you do find this type of a person, I guess, this is kind of nuts and bolts of things. And it sounds like, since you run the academy, that you're okay explaining these things. Somebody says, let's say that same example, John says, oh, I might be interested in something like that. So what do you say next to them? If they say, look, I've got a retirement account, but I don't know what to do with it. I've got some savings that I'm making 0.01 at Chase Bank with. So I guess what's next, so that you don't sound too pushy, because that would kind of alleviate some of the fears of these people asking for money, that, they don't want to be pushy. I don't want to be pushy.
Right. I always make them come to me for it. I never ask anybody like, oh, you ready to go right now? I always say, well, we'll put you on a list, because I have a list of, even when you have none, I say, well, if you know for sure you want to do it, let me know how many, because we do 30s or 50s. So back then it was all just 30s. And I say, well, let me know if you just want to do 1 or 2 or 3. Let me know how many you want to do, and I'll put you on the list. And then when we get to you, I'll send you the deal. Basically, the way we do it, same as any lender, we send it to the attorney. We'll give them your information as the lender. They create a note and deed of trust. You have the exact same protections as a bank would doing a mortgage. And you're the first and only note and deed of trust on the bank. You never give me any money. You wire it to the bank, and the bank's going to send it to our seller. And then starting the first of the next month, you start receiving your payment, $667.33 for 60 payments. It's really simple. I mean, it's and that's no lie. I mean, we're giving you the exact same protections a bank has. The same, people's natural question is going to be like, well, what happened? The first question anyone thinks, what happens if you don't pay, right? Or what's the worst case scenario? What can go wrong? And so, so far to this date, we've been doing it since 2011. Plus, I have probably over 100 students who are using private money. Also, not one person has been a month late. It doesn't mean it can't happen tomorrow, right? And so I always take it a step further by saying, okay, because you can tell people all you want, I'll never default, right? Well, okay, I get hit by a bus tomorrow, right? So let's assume I get hit by a bus. So it's not me, it happened, and nobody wanted my houses, and it all went bad. Well, then the same thing would happen that happens with a bank. They would put it into a foreclosure auction. And at auction, we buy below market, obviously, and we also have been paying it down. It's on a 5-year mortgage, so it gets paid down pretty aggressively. Whatever it sells for at auction, you don't get it all, but you get up to the amount of your balance plus any fees, and then any overage of that, I guess, would go to my estate if I got hit by a bus. And if it didn't sell at auction, you got the house, which would really be your best case scenario, because now you got a house I found through my marketing and through my work. That's what we do, and it got fixed up, and you probably have a slow flip buyer in it. So, I always tell them, I said, the worst case scenario for you is I pay perfectly and you only make 12%, which is, what we agreed on.
Not bad. Yeah, I like that. Okay, that's super useful. I think I'm with you, Kyle. I think fundraising fills me with dread, but it's something I feel like I need to learn and get good at.
The other thing is, John, is that after you do 1 or 2 or 3, and even if your lender said they only want to do 2 or whatever, they had 60 grand they want to invest, it doesn't matter the amount, you'll find, and I've found since 2011, all of my lenders have stemmed from my existing lenders. All of them, because they're, people know people who are like themselves, right? So you're having a conversation at a party, somebody's talking about whatever they invested in, and you're like, well, I'm making 12% every month, comes in a check every single month. And then they're gonna be like, well, see if he needs any more. Man, that sounds good. How long you been doing it? See if the guy will take another lender. And that's where they all come from. Somebody texts, hey, you looking for another lender? I just got one today that was from an attorney that's doing our closings out of state. And he writes up the notes in deed of trust. So he knows that he knows everything. And he sent me that he wants to be a lender. And, their money's out there because it's a good return and it's secure.
That's awesome. So in terms of the process, I guess what's your process to finding the right fit of a property and then finding the right buyer?
So the numbers, even if they're none in your market, because I have people all over the country, right? And there's plenty of people we have people in Oregon, we have people everywhere where they're like, there is no houses, you can't buy a parking space for 30 grand. What are you talking about? So we buy out of the area. So I buy in 4 different states. My main market is where I live. And that I have the majority of my houses here. But after this last run up we had during these last 3 years, we can't find. I mean, I did close on a couple this month. I got lucky on, but most of the time I can't find too many in my local market. So we'll buy in Midwest states, and it's amazing to me. Like I put blinders on to those areas for so long because I just wanted to be in my market, right? And then when I finally started looking, I'm like, how does this even exist? We'll buy a house. No exaggeration. Again, you can Google it, the areas for $20,000, a nice ranch, right? In good condition. And then you look right on Zillow and it'll say the rent estimate or whatever they call it into $975. I'm like, how is a house that's $20,000 bringing $975 a month? It doesn't make any mathematical sense to me, but it sounds like a hell of an investment. And so we'll look at these houses but we won't rent them though. We'll sell them with the long-term owner financing. So, because we don't want to be involved with, fixing stuff. We operate like a bank. So all we do is process payments. First week of the month, we do all the work. We collect everything. And then after that, it's not a whole lot of work till the next month.
So one of the things that you've got on, we get a marketing package from all of our guests and we get to know them a little bit before we bring them out to the public on the show. And you talked about breaking free and how to hit your freedom number in 5 to 7 years. Now that's a very appealing thing for a lot of people. Now, if I was a new person and I don't know anything about real estate, how can I become financially free through real estate in just 5 to 7 years? Because real estate is notorious for being right. that one industry that just takes forever because so many people rely almost exclusively on appreciation. And as you talked about it, all the way through the mid to late 90s, there was none. Right. So how does somebody who hasn't done this actually get in this and start knocking it out of the park? So
it's interesting that you say it takes a long time because most people that aren't interested in my program is because other people are pitching you're going to be rich by next week, right? And then I talk about in my I said you're not going to be making money for 5 years. And so people that are older, people that are older that have been doing it for a while, they appreciate 5 years is nothing. But when you deal with younger people, they're like, no, I want to make money right now. So there's a balance there, but I can tell you exactly, and we've done this for so many people. Like that's why I still do this, and that's why I love it because we set people free. So I'll tell you exactly how. So the first thing we do is we come up with what your freedom number is, right? And we all have different numbers, and we make them write down what your ideal day, your ideal life looks like: car, house, vacations, family, travel, whatever it may be. Then put a number next to it. Simple. I'm sure you've done this exercise before on some format. And then we make that number a monthly number. So what would it take to live that ideal life you just future visioned yourself, right? On average, most people's number is around $10,000 a month. And now we have some that come in at 70, 80 grand. And I'm like, well, you can still do it, but it's going to take you a bit longer, right? Some come in at 3 and 4 grand. They're like, well, if I've got 4 grand a month, I don't have to go to work anymore. So everybody's number is different, but the average I would say is $10,000 a month. Well, with $10,000 a month, and I'm using low numbers. Keep in mind, I like to use low numbers because I always rather over deliver than make a high promise and not deliver. So I always say you're going to get $500 a month per property, right? Even if it's bringing in 9, I'm like, well, you're going to have a vacancy, you're going to have whatever. We're bringing in a lot more now, but let's still use 500. Well, with $500 a month, that means you need to buy 20 slow flips. And if you get 20 slow flips right now, and we work on them for a whole year, you're buying these 20. Then you're not going to make any money for 5 years. In year 6 now, because it took a year to get them, you're at your $10,000 a month, which will probably be 20 because of the actual numbers. But let's say we're just working on those numbers. So yes, is it a struggle? Yeah, it means I'm working all year this year to acquire these 20 and I'm not making anything. And then I'm going to manage them again still for these next 5 years and I'm not making anything. But year 6, all of a sudden it was all worth it. So there's a saying that I love to repeat to people, and it holds true for everything, not just real estate, not just slow flips, but for everything. And I always say, if you do what's easy, life will be hard. And if you do what's hard, life will be easy. And with slow flips, that is taking the hard path. It's easy to just go keep burring. Everybody loves burr. Oh, refi and pull money out, and it's free, tax free, and keep pulling money out. Yeah, you're getting that money, and that's real. That's nice and easy. But you're setting yourself up for hard, because now you still have all this debt you have to take care of now for 30 more years. Or you struggle through and it's hard, but now 61st month, you're like, I got no more debt. That's mine. The check comes in and I get to keep it. And so again, that's just me being beat down by the bust, but I'm ingrained now with free and clear is where our freedom is at.
Absolutely. And I have to question, I got to bring in the age-old question of single family versus multifamily. And from the sounds of it, based on your purchase prices, you are exclusively in single family, or am I wrong?
I am all single family. I have 178 houses now. They are all single family. There's some duplexes and fourplexes in, but I still sell them as one to an investor. A big part, we didn't talk about that, a big part of my buyers are investors. They buy them, fix them up, and rent them out Section 8 or rent them conventionally. And so I also have some duplexes and fourplexes, but no actual multifamily. And I'm not against, this is the thing. I'm not against multifamily. I'm not against burr. I'm not against, all these different things people can do. The short answer I always tell people, I said, there's a million ways to make $1 million, right? Choose one. Choose one. It doesn't mean that just because I love slow flips means whatever you're doing is wrong, right? Multiple things can work simultaneously. I'm doing what works for me, and I'm about free and clear and freedom. Other people are about, Lamborghinis and yachts, and that's the lifestyle they're chasing. And I'm like, well, then this might not be right for you, right? Everybody's different. And I'm very intrigued by multifamily, and I've looked into it a dozen times. And I probably will get into it at some time in my life. But in my personal opinion right now, I don't feel it's the right time. And the reason is everybody's doing it. And when everybody's doing anything, I'm like, that's not when I want to be doing it. When they start getting out of it, that's when I'm going to look at it.
That's a really good point. There's a, I don't know if I would call it a saturation. I don't know if that's the right word for what's going on in multifamily right now, but it's probably pretty close. And I know, just because that's the game that I'm in, that being able to find halfway decent deals out there is almost next to impossible. Which is, I've been having these conversations with my wife, who's AKA my investing partner, about pivoting and going. And she goes, but it feels like you're going backwards. And I'm like, how is it going backwards? It's not going backwards. You figure out what works. And I'm in the same boat with you, where you figure out what works, you stick to it, you're laser focused. But when things change, which they have in the multifamily space, you have to learn how to pivot if you want to continue to grow. And we're still in that growth phase. We're not really in the maintenance phase yet. We're kind of starting to shift that direction. But we are starting to notice that it's time to, figure out where the growth is, and like you said, if multifamily is just, the people are frothy for this real estate market in the multifamily space, it's time to maybe switch off and see something else. We've been looking at ADUs, single families you can add ADUs to, all kinds of different stuff that are as creative as we can possibly make it. So I agree with that 100%. John, did you have a question? I think I started to interrupt you.
No, you're fine, Kyle. I think that's a really fair point. I wanted to ask you about kind of doubt. A lot of people might be listening to this and thinking, how do I jump in? What do I do? What should I do? What's the best route? When you formulated this kind of approach, was there doubt in your mind? Was it kind of feeling it as it goes and proving it, or what did that look like?
Yeah. So the first 5 years was an unproven thought in my brain. So I had a lot of doubt. Like I kept I'm managing all these houses now and making no money. And I'm like, what am I doing? Is this the right thing? I kept wondering, am I doing the right thing? And then, again, once you hit the finish line, which now I'm ahead, so I'm able to take other people along behind me. But when I did it, nobody was doing that. And so it was a lot of doubt that, why don't I just do this other path, right? Go back to, because, you can go back to banks and go back to conventional lending, even hard money lenders. There's other ways to go. And so, yeah, tons and tons of doubt. Now, when I have new people coming on board, I'm always telling people, I say, listen, as long as you stick to the numbers, you can get rid of all your doubt. Because if in a month or 2 or 5, you decide this sucks and you don't like it, then sell it to somebody else in the group who is embracing the program, right? Because people that are doing slow flips want as many as they can get. So I'm like, so if you did it for a month and you were like, oh, I don't like this, then just tell somebody else who's doing slow flips, hey, you want to take over this one? And they'll be more than happy to do it. And so I don't have the doubt anymore, clearly. I mean, we've way outgrown that, but I definitely did. My first 5 years, I had a lot of conversations with myself. What am I doing? I got all these houses and I'm not making any money. But that's the struggle. And then you get through year 6, you get to year 6, and all of a sudden now you get collect every month and you get to keep it.
I'm curious about the timeframes during that 5 years financially. I know this is going to be a question that probably a lot of our listeners are wondering. You've mentioned more than once that you're not really making any money in the 5 years. So just out of curiosity, how do you live? How do you make those payments?
Wholesale. I still
Okay,
wholesale.
gotcha.
I still wholesale to this day. And mostly, I mean, back then I did it out of need. I love wholesaling. I enjoy the business. I do it very different than most people do. I do everything different than most people do. Everybody now is teaching, scaling and VAs and marketing campaigns. And I'm a one-man band. Since 2013, I've been all completely on my own. My wife answers the phone, so I shouldn't say on my own. You work with your wife as well. My wife answers the phone and sets the appointments. I go on the appointments. I buy the house. I text people. I sell it. No crazy softwares, no crazy programs. And we do really well. And I don't do a lot of deals, mind you. I used to do a lot of deals. I used to have a business like everyone teaches to do now, buyers and sellers and coordinators and all kinds of stuff going on. I did more deals than ever, and I made less money than ever. Now I dabble, and I jokingly call it dabbling. I'm like, I might do 1 deal in a month. I might do 3. I sometimes do no deals in a month. I did a deal closed not last month, the month before, my biggest in my life, $250,000 on an assignment fee. But the difference is now the money I make is all mine. Where before I would do all these deals, they go in the account, and I got to pay all these employees and pay all this marketing campaign and pay all this overhead. Now I do a deal and it's mine.
Has simplification been a conscious choice? Like, is that a direct outcome of the recession, or what's been the driver? Okay.
Well, I didn't simplify right away. I simplified in 2013. And I always remember it was 2013. It was 10 years ago this month. I went away for a month in July, my first time doing a month-long trip, and now I do them all the time. But my first time doing a month-long trip, I went to Panama for a month. And when you have a month, and mind you, back then the phones didn't work everywhere. I had bought a Panamanian phone when I was there, but our phones didn't work. And you have a lot of time to think, right? You have a month, you have a lot of time to think. And one of the things I realized is that I don't work for my employee. My employees don't work for me. I work for them. I'm doing deals to keep everybody employed. If I didn't have a deal, if I don't want to lose my contractors, I'll do a marginal or a deal I'm not even going to make anything on because I want to keep everybody working, right? I'm saying yes to deals I wouldn't have said yes to for my buyers because, he did the appointment, I can still make something. And I realized I'm just keeping everybody employed and I'm not making the money. And when I got back, this was 2013, July 16, 2013, I got rid of everybody. And I've been on my own ever since. And I do a fraction of the deals I used to do, but I make way more money. And I don't work much. I mean, I sometimes today I had no appointments. Tomorrow I have 2 appointments. So, I have a 12 and a 1:30 tomorrow, or a 12 and a 2 tomorrow. And that's it. And some days I have none, some weeks I'll have none, and then I get a couple of good leads and I'll go on appointments and I can do 1 deal or 2 deals. And, we make good spreads, but I don't have to split it up or share it. Simplification. It's just mine.
It's a wonderful thing. Yeah. You're building that lifestyle. That's the American dream. And I salute you for that. I think that's wonderful. So I'm curious, first of all, we'd really like to talk about the Master Investor Academy and what it is that you're doing with that, and kind of explain the program a little bit and how it works with the people who join, and kind of what's next for you, if you can give us some kind of a lowdown.
Well, so what's next for me, and I'd rather actually share this than the Master Investor Academy, is I've recently just written a new book that I'm not sure if I told you about already. It's called The Art of the Slow Flip. And I was telling you guys beforehand, I have 250 right now, but I have free copies for anybody who's listening that wants one. It basically goes over the entire process from start to finish on exactly how to do it. And so that's the easiest way. I always tell people are like, well, how do I get started? How do I get it? I said, don't even try and get in a group, and don't try and get started. Start reading. And the shipping and handling, I think, is $7.95. And anybody who wants one can get one. Just go to slowflip.com, slowflip.com. And that to me is the best way to get started. I dropped out of high school in 11th grade, and I never read a book in my life till I got interested in something, which was real estate. And that's really all I read is real estate. But I'm always curious about people who don't read, because I'm like, you have a person, right, who've been doing something 10, 20, 30, 50 years, and they're an expert at something, whatever that may be. When they write a book, that's their best stuff. They're not going to write a book and not put their best stuff in. I'm like, so they have their best stuff and you can get it for $20-$30 or whatever it may be, $7.95 in this case for shipping and handling. And I'm like, so people who don't take advantage of that, I'm like, you're missing the boat. This is the best stuff. And so I try and tell people that's where I want you to start. If somebody was telling me right now, I want to do this, or I want to be in your group, or I don't really want them to until they know what it even is we do. Otherwise, they're going to get in and say, oh, that's not what I thought it was. Right. And so that's where I really like people to start, is read the book. We go through every detail from start to finish. And some people will read it and hate it. What I mean by hate it is not hate the book, but they'll hate the idea of slow flips. And the reason is some people, and I don't know your rental, I know you do apartments. I'm not sure what you have, John. Some people love their houses. Like I used to love mine prior to the bust. Like you take care of it, you have pride in it, you painted the door, you picked out that fixture, and it's your house and you love it, right? Those people that still love their houses will not like slow flips. And the reason is, with slow flips, we don't have that pride of ownership. The guy we sold it to has that pride of ownership, right? We are just the bank. And so some people hate that. They're like, no, I don't want to lose my houses. When a friend of mine recently, I was talking to him about converting his rentals to slow flips. And I'll never forget his answer because it was crazy to me. He says, well, with my luck, they'll all end up buying them. And I'm like, yeah, that would be awesome because we sell it super retail. I'm like, and no agent commissions, no fixing them up. Yes, that would be awesome. You would take that money and buy twice as many. But if you love your house, they're going to hate it. And that's why I think that's always the best place to start. Read the book, The Art of the Slow Flip, and it goes through detail. And then the people it resonates with, those people will love it. And then there's going to be people who will be like, Scott's out of his mind. I want the Lamborghini and I want to have my houses for the rest of my life. And it's not going to resonate with them. And that's okay. I'd rather it be that way.
Love that.
That was a long answer to a short question, huh?
No, I think that's really, really fair. And so in terms of then pivoting from the book or moving from the book to working directly with you, what does that look like?
So we have a program it's called the Freedom Accelerator program. And we have a limited group in there that we do meetings once a week. It's a community as well as coaching, as well as all the courses. So we're constantly updating and changing as things change. I also meet, like I have this attorney who I went out to dinner with when I was in St. Louis because he's doing everybody's closings. And so I interviewed him for them. I asked them, give me a list of questions you have about the laws out there. And so we asked him, and now he's like our exclusive attorney out there. And in different areas, we have multiple states where I try and keep the group as a whole investing in the same markets because now we have infrastructure. When you just pick, like, if you're thinking I'm in Oregon, I'm not going to invest out in Illinois, right? Well, I agree with you. I wouldn't either. But if I have 50 other people who are, and we have a guy who's putting on lock boxes and a guy who's doing pictures and videos and a guy who's doing the closings and a guy who's filling them, and your job is basically just finding the deal, then it's no longer that crazy fear of what am I doing going to some strange place. And so I try and put everybody together. It's really turned into be a great group that they are all working together. It's not just me, and that's what I wanted when we started. I didn't want it to be the Scott show where it's all Scott all the time, right? And it hasn't been that way. They've been doing great working together, and they're doing a lot of deals, which is why I enjoy it so much.
Scott, how can people reach out to you?
So the best way, obviously, like I said, I like people to start off by reading the book. However, if somebody had a question or wanted to reach out to me, I'm on literally every social, including the new one that just came out today.
I was going to say Threads.
Yeah, and it's all under my own name. I'm on everything, TikTok and Twitter and LinkedIn and YouTube and Facebook and now Thread and Instagram, and they're all under my name. So that's the easiest way. You can just type in Scott Jelinek. You don't need any fancy names or numbers. It's just my name.
We'll put some links in the show notes of this so that people can.
Did you sign up for the new one yet?
I did, and then I read that we're going to have to create a new account to sign up for the Investories.
Oh, yeah, okay.
More
I
accounts.
just do everything under my own name.
Yeah.
Kyle's like, damn it, I should have done that.
I actually just made my first post on it right while I was waiting to come on with you guys. I was sitting here and I made my very first post on there.
What was it? Take that, Elon.
Yeah. I actually, when I post, typically it's almost the same content on all platforms. Certain people watch and look certain different ones.
So we need to follow you just for tips, Scott.
Well, and what I do, again, like I told you, some people hate it. But what I do is I tell people, I used to do live events and I stopped about a year ago. And I always tell people, I say, well, what I'm going to teach you is literally going to be 100% the opposite of what everyone else. If you've been to other live events, it's the opposite of what they've taught you. And and so I said, that makes your questions easy to answer. When you ask, think about what that guy would have said. Mine's the opposite answer.
There you go. I think that's words to live by. I love that.
Yeah.
Scott, thank you so much for your time today. We really do appreciate it, and the candid conversation. It's always fun to have someone on who's
thank you for having me on. Yeah, most definitely.
And we'll be back next week.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Investories podcast. We all have a story. What's yours? The Investories podcast.